That saying, time heals all wounds, that's not exactly true. Your life's changed, and you can go about living your different life, but it is a different life once something like that happens. Once you lose your dad to this kind of mindless violence. And so the question is, okay, everything's different now. How are you going to go about living one day at a time in this new reality that's now occurred? As time rocks along, it gets a little bit easier, but it's always different. It's never the same. My dad was a great guy. He was a federal judge and had been for 12 years before his death. Before that, he was a lawyer here in Birmingham, also very involved politically in the Democratic Party back in the day when it was struggling with the issues of civil rights. And he was always very committed to issues of civil rights, and he was a great role model for me. My father was the victim of a bombing occurring December 16, 1989. I wasn't in Birmingham that day. My wife Joyce and I were actually up in New York. I got a phone call late that night telling me what had happened. In the morning hours, Dad received a package through the mail. He thought it was from another judge on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals where Dad worked. So he brought it in, put it down on the kitchen table. He was sitting on one side of the kitchen table and Mom was on the other side. And he opened the flap and the bomb that was inside exploded instantly. He never knew what hit him. Mom was seriously injured. She wakes up on the floor of the kitchen. She had a serious concussion, so everything was a blur. She couldn't hear well. She tried to call someone on the phone, but she couldn't hear a dial tone. She thought the phone had been damaged, but really her hearing was impaired. She knew Dad was dead. She had looked over and realized immediately that he had been killed. But she knew that she had to get police and paramedics there. She was bleeding all over, but she got in her car to drive to the neighbor's house, asked the neighbor to call the police. She drove back and just sat in our driveway until the police came. She eventually healed physically. I think emotionally she never did get over that. She and my dad were really, really close. So you always got the sense that there was an air of sadness with her after that. It was federal, state, local law enforcement all coming together to work on this case. Apparently bombs are like fingerprints to some extent. One of the guys on the team, ATF agent, said, I recognize this kind of bomb. There was a guy in Rex, Georgia, who built a bomb in the 70s and it blew up, and I think it killed or injured his wife at the time. So there was an investigation as a result of that. And that memory is what led them to Walter Moody. He was tried by a federal jury. They moved it up to St. Paul, Minnesota. Mom and I went up for that. And it took 3 weeks. It came back with a conviction on dozens of charges. Subsequently, the state of Alabama prosecuted him for capital murder, and that resulted in conviction in state court in 1996. And he's been in the state prison ever since. The evidence against Moody in terms of motive was based on circumstantial evidence, because Moody never did confess or acknowledge responsibility. Moody did have a case in the 11th Circuit, and his case got thrown out of court. He had filed a case too late. But there are other kind of cases where that statute of limitations does not apply, one of those being in civil rights cases. And so the prosecution's theory was Moody had a grievance against the court for throwing out his case. Meanwhile, he sees these civil rights cases, some of which were based on events occurring a long time ago. They still are able to proceed in the court. And the prosecution's theory is Moody got outraged, seeing a double standard, and for that reason he lashed out at the court. But there was no connection with my dad. My dad never sat on his case. That's one of the real frustrating things about it, because it's almost a random chance. You know, the madman picks you out for some reason that only he and God knows. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. Having sat through both of those trials, the federal trial and the state court trial, and actually seeing and hearing the evidence presented against Moody, I came away without a doubt in my mind that they got the right guy. Moody, to me, I'm convinced, is a psychopath without regard to any other human life. He's just one of those folks that are kind of broke inside and really thinks and feels of no one other than himself. And there's some folks like that. What was important for us was simply seeing that jury come back and finding him guilty. And we knew then he would be spending the rest of his days in prison. He would not have the ability to hurt anyone else. And when we realized that, that was when we got peace of mind. That was closure for us. So I don't think anyone's really pressing to be present for the execution. I suspect, though, that on that particular day, I'll have anxieties. If for no other reason than just because it does kind of bring everything back to mind. That'll be another day where I have to relive everything. The passage of time really has helped. It's been 30 years almost, I guess. But still, there are days where it does come back and really weighs on you a little bit. So I suspect that execution day will be one of those days where it weighs on me.